Over the last 2 weeks, I've been doing some research and going back and reviewing both David and Greg's approach, and I even went back to Reverend Romero's book on the warrior to see how he approached the windows. In the Hailing Hoy, David has moved to mica, and so part of the delay in getting this video done is I actually ordered some mica on eBay, and I've been waiting for it to come, but it just seems to be caught up in the post. So I said, well, let me go ahead, and sometime in the future when I get the mica, I'll go through and just show you how I treated that. The other little interesting thing in both the Speedwell and on the Hailing Hoy, how the back or the glass is treated, should you be able to look through the glass. And David and Greg have used, first they used paper, but first they painted the glass sheets black. Then they didn't like that, and they painted some black paper, and then in the Hoy, they actually changed that to gray. I'm going to do it differently. I've decided that I'm actually going to take the plexiglass and sand it so it looks like opaque glass, so you can't see through it. And it really makes a very nice finish. So whether I end up using the mica, which if it does come in time, I will include it, or the plexiglass, either way, they'll both have a sanded finish, and you will not be able to see through, but you still get the glazed look that you'll see on the front. In book 3, Greg is using 1-inch plexi, which is 0.02 of an inch. I haven't been able to find anything that thin, and I can grind down the plexi I have, but I don't think I'll get quite to 1 inch. Might get to around 2.5 inches thick. But the interesting thing, the question about using plexiglass again comes up. And I've been in the boating industry using plexiglass. I have a boat that is 40 years old that has a plexiglass windshield on it. And even though it has a few scratches on it, there's absolutely no discoloring on it. So I'm not concerned at all about it. Now we're going to still follow the lines that we had established. You'd remember we had used the French ruler to get that center line so it comes right across the frames. And then we're going to mark it on each of the frames. And then I've made up some very small thin stock, which I'm going to place in between. Now what's interesting is looking at Greg's, how Greg made up the frames. He actually recessed the back of the frame and put a recessed mullion in the piece so that he got a really strong fitting. It's the correct way to do it, but it's very difficult, and he did his on the pre-arc. Because we have CA, and CA is such a beautiful strong glue, I'm simply going to mark the pieces and put them in place and then sand the frame down so I get a nice clean joint. So again, it just means remarking the frames so that we get a nice line flowing. And I've actually done one already. So I'm cheating a little bit and showing you. Here's a made up one with the plexi in the back. And of course, as we discussed before, you can see right through it, which is both a good thing and a bad thing. So in my case, I'm certainly going to sand out the back of the plexi. When I'm sanding the mullion, I need to get a thin piece of wood because I can't hold it properly against the fence. I also mark the mullion so that I know which side I'm sanding, as I could easily make an error. Then I rough cut it. Line it up again, and then I can just get my first angle in. No, it has to be quite a bit more. You just keep going until you get it. And to get a nice tight fit, try and fit it on the long side. In fitting the mullions, you may find that using the sander is a challenge. So if you know what the angle is, you can use a little chisel like this, and oops, once it's nice and sharp, it'll cut very easily, and then cut the other side, and then take off little tiny bits using a small chisel. There are times when I found this is much easier to use simply because when you're working on the sander, the piece is so small that it's difficult to get a proper grind using the sandpaper. Of course, there are many ways to sand the little mullion pieces. You can use a regular file, diamond file, and I've also found it very useful to use a pen sander. I would simply put a mark on the piece and sand down, and I find that works great for holding very fine pieces. So maybe the Jim Barnes desktop sander isn't the ideal way to sand it once you cut the very small piece off. So again, just double checking and remembering we are putting the mullion on the outside face, not the inside face, because I've built the frames oversize and I'm going to cut off the inside frame. So once you've got it right and you've lined it up and you've checked it against the model and checked it against the line, you stick it and fit it in. What I find interesting is that in book 3, Greg actually installs the horizontal pieces or the vertical pieces first, ones that go from the bottom to the top. And then he fights to get the horizontal line clear. I think the horizontal line is the most difficult and most important, and if you get it wrong, visually you'll see it and it'll upset you. So I've done the reverse, not saying his is wrong or mine is right, but this is the way I found it easiest to get the best result. So here we are, and we got a nice clean line, exactly what we were looking for. Really very happy with it. So now it's just the center line, and the center line obviously is going to be halfway between each one of these, the sides of the frames, and then we'll take them down like we took this one down, and then finally shape the mullions, or munions, as I've seen in one of the book that is referred to. So again, the only challenge here is to make sure that they're both up and down, and we have a little jig that we've made up that makes sure that they line up with each other. So once we fit one, we can fit the other. So here they are, all lined up beautifully. And what I've done is, this is my secret little jig, because I'm going to sand these down virtually to probably 1.5 inches to 2 inches down here. I've put an alignment piece at the back. Not sure if you can see it, but this is a sacrificial piece that will allow me, when I go to line up the individual little mullion pieces between, that I get a nice straight line. So that's my little jig. Of course, in Greg's case, he would have recessed it and used a solid piece so that it would line up perfectly. Probably the better way, and this is my cheat, and a cheat that works pretty well. Now we're going to take the completed frame down to size, and we're probably going to take it down to somewhere between 1.5 to 2 inches. Anything below that, it'll probably fall apart. In the old days, I would have actually done this on the Preac table saw, but I recently saw a film put on by the Nautical Research Guild on desktop, well, on safety and safety using a table saw. And I think if I show you what I used to do, they'd probably drum me out of the society. So we're going to do this. We're going to do this on the old Preac desktop sander. So let's give you an idea of how we do that. You can use a thickness sander, and you just need to make up a little jig to hold the piece because it could very easily go flying. And to do that, simply put the piece on and you can send it through. Increase the adjustment. And you keep going until you get the correct height that you want to take the frame down to. This is certainly much safer. I tried this on a Jim Barnes thickness sander, but I destroyed the piece because it doesn't have access like this old Preac does to push the piece through. Now that we've got them all fitted, we need to clean them up, and we've done as we've done in the other videos. We've taken a little chisel and come inside, rounding off the edges, and then we took a file and cleaned it up. And you know that wonderful finish that you see on David and Greg's models, and you can't understand, it's really the preparation of the wood. So what we're going to do is put some sanding sealer on the outside of each of these, let that dry, and then sand off. Then we're going to put the termite fluid on, a Trinidad issue, to protect the pieces. And then finally, if we're going to leave them natural, which I haven't decided yet, we'll use the wipe-on poly. Failing that, we are going to paint them white. And I'll do that again with a brush, simply because they're small little parts and very easy to do. In the back of book 3, Greg shows the Pegasus and shows the frames painted white. And then further on, there's some pictures of a Harold Hahn model of the Kingfisher, and those are left natural. So again, the decision is going to be yours. I'm going to choose to paint them white simply because I'm following the build as outlined by David and Greg. And I think it's only fair to follow whenever possible what's shown in the book. And that brings us to the point that, if you remember, when I explained how I used the mill over there to cut the plexiglass and I put the mullions in, there's just absolutely no way you could practically paint the mullions after you install them without getting paint all over the plexiglass. So again, it's sort of taking you really back to this way of making up the lights. And so, in a sense, I'm suggesting if you're going to paint them white, you need to forget that method. You might get away with it using a clear finish or a wipe on poly finish, but certainly not if you're going to use colorful paint to paint the mullions. Again, I'm going through this simply for the record. You've seen me do this before, but we have wood boring pests that can come from the forest in some of the woods we have, and this will go all the way up to North America. But in the tropical climates, dry wood termites are really the pest. They're all over. People refer to them here as rain flies, but they're really termites that when the moisture is correct, they'll swarm and enter anything, and a model is as perfect a place as you can get to establish a new home. So all my models are now protected with termite fluid. It will penetrate the wood. It may not get through the sanding sealer, but it'll certainly reside on the top of it. And then when you paint over it, it locks the termite fluid inside. And then this is just me showing you that when I finished, I put it away and have it well labeled. I was going to use the airbrush. I went into my stock of paints, no pre-mixed airbrush white. So down to the shop I went, and of all the colors they don't have, it's pre-mixed white. So I bought this titanium white. It's acrylic, and what I'll do is thin it down with some water, and then I'm going to hand paint it. Again, it's not a major issue. Remember, acrylic is self-leveling. So once I water it down, I'll get a nice, clean, thin finish. I'll put 2, maybe 3 coats on it, and that should be enough to give me a beautiful white finish on the mullions and on the frames. I'm really mixing a tiny little amount up. Really 5-10 drops. And again, just added small amount of water. This little pipette is perfect for adding tiny amounts of water. And because normally when you try to add water, you end up adding too much. So again, taking time, making sure I get good coverage, putting the pieces on a little frame so that I don't get too much of the paint on the side, and that's it. I am pretty happy with how this has come out. So now we need to fit the plexiglass pieces, grind the back surface down, and then install the windows with the plexi as part of a unit. I will put a very slight amount of PVA glue on the very edge of the frames so that the plexi and the frame become one. But not enough that it will leak out or come on the plexiglass at all. And then we'll finish up the stern of the boat in the next video. So we'll see you then, and remember, keep modeling.